Hey everyone, I wanted to make this little tidbit quickly. This was unfortunately not in the cards when making this episode, but it is fitting to make a tribute here. On February 1st, 2024, Carl Weathers, who played Dylan in this movie, as well as Apollo Creed in the Rocky movies, and Greef Karga in The Mandalorian, sadly passed away at the age of 76. This review is not only a tribute to Carl's role in the movie we're going to be covering, but this is also a tribute to his wonderful career from the past 45 decades. Rest in peace. Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS. Yes, I got a new haircut, and this is my pet gorilla, George. I've already talked at length about the Xenomorphs in Alien, the Terminators in that franchise, and a few others. However, there is one more monster that I can talk about from the 1980s sci-fi monster trinity, and that monster is the Predator. But where did it all begin? Well, let's talk about it. Enough, this story begins with the 1976 classic Rocky. Yes, Rocky, of all movies, is where this story begins. Rocky was a big hit for Sylvester Stallone, which meant it spawned a few sequels, with Rocky IV being particularly well known as the movie that killed off Rocky's longtime friend and beloved side character, Apollo Creed. It was also known for introducing Ivan Drago. So, why am I talking about Rocky in this review? Well, it all comes down to the fact that there was a joke made by someone we know. The joke in question revolved around Rocky needing to fight an alien in the fourth sequel. Jim and John Thomas, two brothers famous for screenwriting, took the joke and ran with it, turning it into a movie about an alien hunter stalking soldiers in the jungle, with a movie titled simply Hunter. Unfortunately, since the two weren't big names, they simply gave the screenplay to a Fox producer named Michael Levy. Levy really enjoyed the script and handed the screenplay over to another producer named Joel Silver, who went to Lawrence Gordon and John McTiernan, who co-produced and directed the final production, getting a cast composed of the Terminator himself, Apollo Creed himself, a former Navy SEAL, a 7'2" man inside of a rubber monster suit designed by the greatest of all time, and you had a movie that's only gotten better over time. The movie was a surprise hit at the box office, and received an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. If that doesn't allude to the quality of this movie, I have no idea what will. Needless to say, nearly 4 decades later, does this movie still hold up? We are going to find out today. This is the 1987 action horror movie, Predator. Major Alan Schaefer, better known as Dutch, played by the iconic Arnold Schwarzenegger, a soldier of fortune, is hired by the US government to secretly rescue a group of politicians trapped in Guatemala. But when Dutch and his team, which consists of weapons expert Blaine, played by Jesse Ventura, tracker Billy, Blaine's friend Mac, explosive expert Poncho, and radio operator Hawkins, played by the late Sunnyland Ham, Bill Duke, Richard Chavez, and Shane Black respectively, and CIA agent Al Dillon, played by the late Carl Weathers, land in Central America, something is gravely wrong. After finding a string of dead bodies, the crew discovers that they are being hunted by a brutal creature with superhuman strength and the ability to disappear into its surroundings. Predator is a movie that every time I watch it and reflect on it, I like it a little bit more than the previous time. You have a movie with a bunch of mercenaries in a jungle where nature has the upper hand rather than them. It works out surprisingly well and doesn't feel cliched or boring. It's a very unique idea for a monster movie, and it's sad to hear that none of the sequels lived up to the hype of this one. Although Predators, as I've heard, does come pretty close, as does the prequel, Prey. Regardless, Predators is one of the only classic 80s movies I can take seriously. and I don't say that lightly. Sure, the movie's got a huge cheese factor to it, but it has an intelligence to its cheesiness, which gives it its own unique charm that will carry on for years to come. However, now that you know my thoughts on the overall tone for the story for Predator, let's dive into the main analysis and see what Predator does right. There are a lot of things it does right. First things first, I downright love this cast. It's not needlessly big, and all of the characters have distinct personalities. Hawkins is the immature little brother figure, Blaine knows how to handle weapons, Max the softest one, Billy's got the nervous tick, and Poncho is the religious one. Yeah, there's not much else to say about him. You do like these characters and you don't want to see them die, but unfortunately there's no tension when that happens. All of them have pretty brutal ways to go. Hawkins is disemboweled, Blaine is shot through the chest with a laser, Max's brains are blown out, Billy sacrifices himself to buy the group some time, and Poncho's head is blown to bits. Yeah. They all die in unique ways, and it shows how ruthless the Predator actually is. And it adds to the R rating this movie earns expertly. Now, the three characters that have the most screen time are Dylan, Anna, and Dutch. Dylan is the CIA agent who wants to get the job done, but that means that the rest of the crew doesn't exactly care about him. However, they do listen to him and serve by his side until the bitter end. His character also has a pretty grisly way to go out, which includes having his arm blown off and being stabbed by the Predator. His death meant a lot, and it was easily one of the highlights of the movie to me. Dylan as a character worked really well, and we have the script and Carl Weathers to thank for that. Anna is an interesting character too. She starts out as a guerrilla in the South American jungle, before being apprehended by the group. She eventually becomes the one who tells the group about the legend of the Predator, and how it has been stalking the jungle since she was a child. She was an interesting character, and I wish that if we ever get a direct sequel that follows the cast from this movie, she would be expanded on. As for our lead, we have Arnold as Dutch. Now, I am aware that Arnold was typecast in a bunch of movies in this period, but that doesn't matter to me because he was so much fun in this one. He has a ton of wonderful one-liners, such as... And never forget... Seriously, who said some good old 1980s cheese doesn't work once in a while? This is one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best roles to date, and it only gets better the more times I watch this movie. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, it's time to talk about the Predator itself. While not as iconic as the Xenomorph or the Terminator, this thing is quite something if I do say so. For starters, most of the movie conceals this thing, with only its infrared vision, the glowing yellow eyes of its mask, its neon green blood, and its invisible silhouette being the only indicators as to what the hell this thing is. When you finally see it in all of its glory, you realize that this thing is a 7-foot 2-inch tall beast that wears a silver mask and has pretty awesome weaponry. Oh, don't forget the dreadlocks too, that's the important part. When it removes its mask, you see something otherworldly, and something I can't describe with any words ever, at least not in the English dictionary. Other than it's a gnarly looking alien monster. Other than that, this thing is sadistic. It can mimic human dialect, and it kills for sport, ripping the skull and spinal cord out of the body to wear on its armor as a trophy. If you thought the Xenomorph and the Terminator were sadistic, this monster is on a whole new level when it comes to sadistic personalities. The thing is so sadistic that it doesn't even let Dutch kill it. It blows itself up while laughing maniacally. After seeing the movie, there was no doubt in my mind that the Predator is still one of cinema's most iconic monsters, and will continue to be even nearly 40 years after its inception. So, now that I've talked about the characters, let's talk about the Oscar-nominated effects. First things first, the Predator itself. This beast was designed by Stan Winston, the absolute best creature effects designer of all time. The Predator is still impressive by today's standards, with a large amount of detail put into the beast's design, as well as the impressive animatronic work on the face, which was wonderfully expanded upon in Predators with the large Super Predator, which looks spectacular even 14 years later. But yes, the Predator will always be one of those effects that holds up after its initial reception. And there's no doubt in my mind that it will never not hold up. Other than that, the explosion effects hold up pretty well, the environment of the jungle adds to the frightening atmosphere, and it just feels timeless overall. As far as the music goes, it was composed by Alan Silvestri, who is best known for the Back to the Future score. Silvestri offered us a very eerie and heart-pounding composition that still gives me goosebumps. The drums when our characters are in the jungle, as well as the frightening violin cue when the Predator shows up, and the tension-filled music during the action scenes are all great. But the main theme is easily the highlight. It sets up the tone perfectly, telling us that the movie will be an action-packed romp with something very frightening in between. Major props to Alan Silvestri for giving us great and iconic soundtrack that will, much like the effects, hold up until the end of time. Finally, we come to the scare factor and the action sequences. This movie is pretty freaking tense. Once we see what the Predator is capable of, we realize what kind of a monster we are truly dealing with, and it never fails to give me goosebumps. As far as action scenes are concerned, two of my favorites come in the form of when Dylan fights off the Predator and his arm is torn off, and Dutch's battle with the Predator. They're both iconic and lead to some very cool moments. So overall, Predator is a classic. It's got a great form of charisma, a great cast, great action sequences, great score, great effects, and overall is a great movie. I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to make a monster movie set in the jungle, and to those looking to expand their horizons. This movie, much like Alien, Aliens, and The Terminator, gets the highest praise from me in the form of a 10 out of 10. Gather your group of commandos and give this one a watch. Well, that's it for this review. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the movie in the comment section below, and tune in next week for another review. That said, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap.